I was not always this weak old woman standing in the cold. Once I was a mother who believed love could conquer hunger, poverty, and loneliness. My name is Maria, and my daughter, Elena, was my entire world. When my husband died, I was left with nothing but debts and a little girl clinging to my skirt. People whispered that I would never survive, that a widow couldn't raise a child alone. But I did. I worked myself to the bone. I sewed late into the night until my fingers bled. I cleaned other people's houses while mine fell apart. I carried bricks at construction sites for pennies, hiding the pain in my back, all for Elena. She was so bright, so full of fire. Even as a child, she would say, "Mama, I will make you proud. I'll give you a house bigger than all of this." I believed her. Every coin I earned, I saved for her schooling. I ate bread crusts while she ate soup. I wore torn shoes while she wore polished ones. When she cried because she had no books, I sold my wedding ring, and she did not disappoint me. Elena was brilliant. She studied by candlelight until her eyes grew red, but she never gave up. She won scholarships, prizes, teachers' admiration. When she was accepted into the most prestigious university in the city, I wept as though I had been given new life. I stood in the back of the graduation hall wearing my patch dress, and I clapped until my hands were raw. My little girl walking across the stage in her gown, holding her diploma. She looked back at me with shining eyes. For a moment, I thought she had not forgotten. For a moment, I believed that all my sacrifices had been worth it. Years later, Elena married a wealthy businessman. His name was Victor. Tall, handsome, with a voice that dripped charm, but eyes that dripped disdain. From the first handshake, I felt his coldness. He looked at my rough hands and said politely, "Ah, the mother," as though I were an object, not a person. I wanted to ignore the unease. I told myself, if Elena is happy, then I will be happy. She moved into a mansion. She threw parties with dignitaries and business moguls. She wore diamonds and silk. I stayed in my little cottage, my roof leaking when it rained. But I was proud that my daughter had climbed so high. At first she visited. She would bring gifts, clothes, perfumes, sometimes an envelope with money. I would cook her favorite dishes and we would laugh like old times. But gradually the visits became shorter. Then they stopped. Her calls, once daily, became weekly, then monthly, then not at all. I began calling her instead, only to be answered by her secretary. "Madam is busy," she would say, always busy, too busy for her mother. One day, I decided to visit her unannounced. I carried a basket of fruit and bread, my heart pounding with both excitement and fear. When I arrived, the guard at the gate looked me up and down. His lip curled. "Who are you here for?" I swallowed my pride. "I am her mother." He hesitated, then opened the gate. I thought that meant I was welcome. I was wrong. Inside, the house glowed with light. Music spilled from the windows. Laughter rang in the air. I realized there was a party happening. I reached the door, smoothed my scarf, and knocked. Victor opened it. His face twisted when he saw me. "What are you doing here?" he said coldly. I stammered. "I came to see Elena. I brought food, her favorite." He looked over his shoulder, then stepped outside, closing the door behind him. The laughter inside continued, muffled. "She's busy," he said. His voice was sharp as glass. "She doesn't need this." His eyes flicked to the basket as though it were garbage. "Please," I whispered, "just a moment." But before I could finish, he slammed the door in my face. The sound echoed in the night, louder than any storm. I stood there, frozen, my hands shaking, the basket slipping from my fingers. The bread tumbled to the ground. The fruit rolled down the steps. My heart shattered. For a long moment, I could not move. My daughter, the little girl I had bled and cried for, was only a few steps away, but I was treated like a beggar at her door. I bent down to pick up the fruit. tears dripping onto the pavement. That was when I heard it. Through the window, a voice, Victor's voice, laughing. I told you she would come crawling. Your mother doesn't belong here, Elena. She will only embarrass us. And then silence. Not protest, not defense, not even a word. Elena said nothing. I pressed my hand against the cold door, praying she would open it, that she would run to me, that she would prove him wrong. But she did not. The door remained shut. The mansion glowed, filled with warmth, with music, with strangers. And outside, I stood alone in the shadows. I walked home that night in the dark, my scarf pulled tight, my eyes burning. But what I discovered next changed everything. The days after that night were heavy. My body moved, but my soul stayed frozen at that closed door. I told myself maybe it was a mistake. Maybe Elena hadn't known. Maybe she hadn't heard. But then the rumors started. At the market, women whispered when I walked by. That's her, the mother of the rich woman who pretends she has no family. Their words stung more than any knife. I wanted to scream that it wasn't true, that my daughter still loved me, that she would come, that she would explain. But deep inside, a tiny voice whispered back, "Does she?" Days passed. I wrote her a letter, pouring out my heart, begging her to visit, to let me see her, to let me hold her just once. Weeks later, the envelope returned, unopened. I went to the mansion again. The guard didn't even pretend to hesitate this time. "You can't come in," he said flatly. "Madam doesn't want visitors." "Madam," I repeated. That word tasted bitter in my mouth. My daughter, reduced to a title, untouchable. I pleaded. He turned away. It was not just rejection. It was erasure. One afternoon, I passed by her mansion on my way back from the clinic. I stopped in the shadow of the tall gates, clutching my shawl. Cars lined the driveway. Men in suits, women in gowns. Music throbbed from inside. Another party. I lingered by the gate, foolishly hoping to catch a glimpse of her. Then I saw it. Elena, in a golden dress, smiling as she posed for photographers. Her arm looped around Victor's. Flash after flash lit up her face. She looked radiant, dazzling, like a star. But her eyes slid over the crowd, and when they brushed the place where I stood just outside the gates, they darted away, as though I were invisible. My throat tightened. My legs shook. That night I cried into my pillow until the fabric was soaked through. Still, a mother's love is foolish. It bends. It forgives. I convinced myself again that perhaps Victor was controlling her, that she was trapped, afraid, unable to reach me, but the truth would reveal itself soon. It came one afternoon when my neighbor, old Clara, rushed to my cottage, her voice trembling. "Maria, have you heard?" "Heard what?" I asked, dread pooling in my stomach. "Elena. She gave a speech at the gala last night. It's everywhere. The newspapers, the radio. She said she came from nothing, that she built herself without help, that she has no family." I felt the air leave my lungs. "No family?" I whispered. Clara nodded sadly. "She denied you, said she was an orphan, that she rose on her own strength." My hands began to shake so violently that I dropped the cup I was holding. It shattered against the floor. An orphan. She had erased me, all my sacrifices, my nights without food, my torn hands, my sleepless years. Erased, and worse, she was praised for it. The newspapers called her a self-made woman. The crowd had applauded her resilience. But I knew the truth. Without me, she would not have made it through school. Without me, she would not have survived. Without me, she would not exist. I wanted to confront her, to scream, to force her to look into my eyes and remember, but she would not answer my calls. One night, trembling with fever, I called again. I was so weak I could barely lift the receiver. A woman answered, her secretary. "This is her mother," I whispered. "Tell her, I am sick. I need her. Please." The line was silent for a moment. Then the secretary spoke, her voice cold. "Madam is busy. Do not call again." The click of the line ending felt like a blade against my throat. I dropped the phone. I lay there in the dark, fever burning through me, rain dripping from the ceiling onto my face. I thought of my daughter's laughter as a child, her promises, her tears when she failed her first exam, and I told her she could still rise. And now she had abandoned me, denied me. I stopped going to the market. I couldn't bear the looks, the whispers, the pity. Children ran past my cottage laughing, their mothers watching them with pride. I turned away. I could not look. One day, while walking by the town square, I overheard a group of businessmen discussing Elena. "Her husband's projects are shady," one said. "She's smarter than him," another replied. "She knows how to polish the image. Without her, he'd be exposed." My chest tightened. So she knew. She knew about his corruption. She was part of it. I returned home that evening and sat in the silence for hours. Then I rose, went to the drawer, and pulled out an old wooden box. Inside were letters, Elena's old school letters, scholarship approvals, receipts from the money I sent, the loan papers I repaid in her name, and a proof of everything she denied. I sat staring at them, trembling. My heart was still broken. My body was still weak. But inside, something began to stir. It was not just grief now. It was anger, a slow, simmering anger that spread through my veins like fire. I realized something. If my daughter could erase me, then I could remind the world of who I was, of what she owed, of what she had hidden. And in that moment, I understood. This story was no longer about love. It was about revenge. But what form would it take? I didn't know yet. Only one thing was certain. My daughter and her husband had built their empire on lies. And I had the power to tear those lies apart. I thought I had nothing left. The night I fell ill, I truly believed it would be my last. My body was weak, my spirit crushed. I lay on my narrow bed, the wind whistling through the broken window pane, rain dripping onto the floor. My chest burned with fever, but what burned deeper was betrayal. I whispered her name. "Elena." No answer came, only silence. If death had taken me then, I might have gone quietly. But death did not come. Something else did. One evening, Clara, my old neighbor, knocked on my door. She carried a pot of soup, her eyes full of pity. "You can't go on like this." "Maria," she said. I forced a smile. "I'm fine." But she shook her head. "You're not fine, and neither is what she's done to you." She looked around, then lowered her voice. "People are talking. They say your daughter and her husband are involved in something dark. That money of theirs, it isn't clean." My stomach twisted. Clara leaned closer. "If you have proof, anything, don't keep it hidden. Don't let her bury you alive while she pretends to be a saint." After she left, I sat in the dim light, staring at the wooden box on my table, the box that held my past, the proof. With trembling hands, I opened it again. Inside were the letters Elena wrote when she was young, calling me her hero, receipts for every loan I paid, the letter from her first teacher, praising me for raising such a brilliant girl, her scholarship certificates, all signed, all showing how I fought and begged for her chances, proof that she was not self-made, proof that she had a mother. But there was more. Beneath those papers lay another envelope, one I hadn't opened in years. It was from the bank. My hands shook as I unfolded it. It detailed the land deed that had once been in my husband's name, land that Victor had helped me sell years ago when times were hard. Only now, reading carefully, I saw it. The price was far below its worth. He had tricked me. That land had later been developed into one of their first luxury projects. my sacrifice, my land, my blood, and it had built their empire. I pressed the papers to my chest, my breath ragged. It was like the fever broke. My weakness burned away, replaced with fire. For the first time in months, I felt strong. I realized something important. I wasn't powerless. I had weapons. The past they tried to erase, the evidence they thought forgotten. I began gathering more. I went to the dusty library archives. I asked old friends, old teachers, even former employers. Piece by piece, I collected testimonies, stories, proof. Everywhere I went, people remembered me. They remembered the woman who carried bricks, who scrubbed floors, who begged them to give her daughter a chance. "Of course we remember, Maria," they said. "You sacrificed everything." And some of them whispered their own stories about Elena and Victor, how they had ignored the people who once helped them, how they looked down on the very hands that had lifted them. It wasn't just my betrayal, it was everyone's. And slowly, I felt something grow inside me, a strength I hadn't known in years. I wasn't just a mother abandoned. I was a witness to the truth. But how could I use it? One evening, as I organized the papers, I found myself staring at the local newspaper lying on my table. On the front page was Elena's face, smiling beneath a headline, "Socialite couple donates millions to charity gala." My lips curled into a bitter smile. A charity gala, with cameras, with reporters, with the world watching. That was it. That was where the truth would be told. For years, she had taken everything from me, my pride, my dignity, my name. But now I would take everything from her. Not with knives, not with poison, not with violence, but with truth. The truth she had buried. The truth that I carried. I sat back in my chair, clutching the papers to my chest, my heart pounding like a drum, and in that moment I whispered to the empty room, "Elena, you may have shut your door to me, but I will open every door you thought was locked." The turning point had come. The only question was, how far would I go? I chose the slow burn. I chose words and witnesses. I chose light. I started small. A conversation here, a memory there. Nothing dramatic at first, just truths whispered into the right ears. I walked to the old school where Elena had studied. I found the principal, Mr. Alvarez, who still kept every scholarship record in a battered filing cabinet. He remembered me. He remembered the nights I pounded the school gate begging for my daughter's chance. He signed a short letter, simple, factual, that said Elena's education had been made possible by community scholarships and outside help. He added his name. He added the dates. Next, I went to the woman who sold stationery near the university. She remembered the small girl buying cheap notebooks. She remembered me slipping coins into her hand. She wrote a note, a teacher, a neighbor, a man who had once loaned me the price of a bus ticket when Elena had an interview. Each note was a small flame. I fed those flames to the press, not sensational tabloids, respectable papers, men and women who still valued facts. I walked into a newsroom with my bundle of papers and begged them to listen. They laughed at first. A frail old woman with a stack of yellowed receipts. Then they read. They called back. They came to my cottage. They sat with me while I opened the wooden box and laid out my life. The first article was careful, factual. Local woman says socialite daughter denied her. The headline read. It spread like tinder. Comment threads filled with outrage. People who had cheered Elena's self-made story started asking questions. Elena responded with a lawyer's statement. "My mother is being used by jealous parties," it said. "We will not dignify lies with a response." Her publicist scrubbed her social pages. Her sponsors called. Her phone did not stop ringing, but with demands, not comfort. That was when Victor showed cracks. He paced in his study, throwing open documents in fury. He had built a facade, and now that facade was pocked with holes. Investors began whispering. A reporter mentioned the land deal I'd found. The rumor took root. How had cheap land become luxury towers? I did not stop. I organized a quiet charity in my town for the elderly, for mothers like me. I used nothing of Elena's money. I used community donations and the small savings I'd scraped together. I invited the press. I invited people who had been ignored by the wealthy. I invited the cameras. The day of the event, Elena held her own gala across town. Her invitations glimmered. Her guests reeked of polish and perfume. She would stand under crystal chandeliers and smile for the cameras. I stood under a tent made of patch cloth. My banner was handwritten. The crowd that came to me was real. Widows with hands like mine, old teachers, people who had kept my letters and receipts for years. They came because we had fed them, because we had helped them, because they saw me and remembered the quiet woman who never asked for applause. A local TV crew covered both events. They tasted the contrast like vinegar and honey. At first, the network ran both features side by side. Elena's gala, glamour, canned laughter. My charity, faces of real people, eyes wet with gratitude. That night changed everything. A journalist I trusted, a woman named Rosa, dug into the land deed. She found discrepancies, rough translations, names, signatures that didn't match. She contacted a lawyer who specialized in property fraud. The lawyer found a trail leading directly to a shell company registered in Victor's name, a paper trail that linked a cheap sale to a later inflated development. Rosa put it on air, the headline, "Questions Raised Over Developers' Land Deals." Viewers watched Victor's projects with fresh suspicion. Sponsors called, investors froze. Elena's name was pulled into the story not because she had acted, but because she had benefited. Pressure mounted. A major sponsor asked for an emergency consultation. Elena's PR firm panicked. Behind closed doors, she tried to call me. I did not answer. I wanted her to feel the cold I felt. I wanted her to remember the nights I composed these very receipts by candlelight. Then came the night she walked into my town looking for damage control. She came with lawyers and an assistant. She wanted quotes, statements, apologies. She wanted to show the papers that would clear her name. Instead, she found a room full of people with memories and signatures. Former teachers recited dates. Neighbors presented receipts. A retired official produced an old photograph of me delivering a parcel to the school with my daughter at my side. Each piece of evidence was a chisel against the statue she had polished for years. Elena looked smaller with every testimony. Her voice shook. She tried to laugh it off. She tried to charm. Old friends shook their heads. The room's sympathy fell away like paint from old wood. At the same time, the legal inquiries began. Authorities reopened files. Victor's company was audited. Contracts were scrutinized. Loans were examined. What had been hidden in neat ledgers appeared with fingerprints on them. Not my fingerprints, but his. Sloppy signatures. Cut corners. I watched it all on a small black and white television at Clara's house. I sat with a cup of tea and the papers that had started it all. I felt no glee, only a deep, steady satisfaction, like a cold hand finally finding purchase after years of empty grasping. Elena called me that night. Her voice was thin. "Mama," she said, "please, can we talk?" I looked at the ceiling. I could have gone. I could have opened the door to forgiveness and sudden relief. I did not. I let the phone ring out. They lost sponsors. They lost prestige. Victor paced like a caged animal, his empire shrinking under light and truth. Elena's name, once a brand, now carried the smell of scandal. And I opened my door to people who knew me, people who loved me not for my connections but for my hands. But the fallout was not finished. In the quiet after the headlines, a new question began to rise. Would Elena ever find a way back? Would she beg? Would she truly feel the weight of what she had done? Or had the world taught her only to look away? I kept my watch. I had started a fire. I intended to see it burn until it cleared the air. The days after the storm were quieter. Headlines moved on. People forgot, as they always do. But some things do not wash away. Not the truth. Not the stain of a door slammed in an old woman's face. Victor was arrested. Paperwork did the damage I could not. Elena's life unraveled, not all at once, but in steady, certain steps. Sponsors withdrew. Investments were frozen. Her friends sent polite messages that turned into silence. People she had smiled beside at galas no longer returned her calls. She came to my door once, not in silk this time, not surrounded by glitter. She came alone. Her face was pale. Her eyes were ringed with fatigue. She pressed her hand to the knob and hesitated, as if the weight of what she'd done had doubled the wood. I stood in the doorway of my little house, the same doorway I had always known. The air smelled of the soup Clara had brought that morning. Children played in the lane. Life, small and honest, buzzed around us. "Elena," I said. My voice was not gentle. It was not cruel either. It was steady. "Why did you deny me?" She looked away. "I was scared," she whispered. "We were building. I needed to belong. Belong?" I laughed once. It sounded like a broken bell. "You belonged to me first." She began to cry. Real crying. No audience, no camera. Just a woman whose name had been built by others, now crumbling. "I am sorry," she said. "I never wanted to hurt you." Words, thin as tissue. They could not stitch years back together. I remembered the nights I had sewn until my eyes blurred. I remembered the rings of sweat on her school uniform when I carried her to extra classes. I remembered promising her the sky. She reached for me. For once I did not move away. I held her hand. Her skin was cool. We stood like that a long time. There was no big reconciliation, no sweeping montage, just two women breathing in the same air, both changed. "I forgave you a long time ago in my head," I said finally. "Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean you escape the truth. You must live with what you've built and what you've broken." She nodded, her shoulders shaking. "What will you do?" she asked. I thought of my charity, my little band of neighbors, the teachers who had stood by me. I thought of the children who now had books because of what we did. I thought of a life that, despite everything, had meaning. "I will keep living," I said. "I will keep opening my door to those who need it. I will not watch someone else close theirs and pretend nothing happened. That is all." She looked at me with a hunger I recognized. Regret, yes, but also a need to be seen. She needed absolution. I could not give her absolution for the past, only for the future. We did not become a fairy tale family again. We became something else, honest, fragile, real. She visited sometimes, not often. When she did, she sat at my small table and we ate simple food. No chandeliers, no cameras, only the honest clatter of plates. People asked me if I felt vindictive, if revenge had hollowed me out. The truth is simpler. Revenge did not make me happy. It made me clear. It gave me a name again. It returned to me what had been stolen, the memory of my hands and my work. And for that, I felt no shame. One afternoon, as the sun leaned low, a young woman from my charity took my hand. "Mama Maria," she said, smiling, "you saved us." I looked at the faces around me. They were not rich. They were not famous. They were full of thanks, full of small victories, full of life. Elena watched from the doorway. She smiled, small, honest. It was not the dazzling smile of a gala. It was a human smile. It was enough. The door had closed on me once. It would not stay closed forever, not if I had anything to say about it. And that was the day I learned a small, fierce truth. Sometimes justice arrives slowly. Sometimes it arrives wrapped in paper and signatures and quiet courage. Sometimes it arrives as people who remember. Now when a neighbor brings a child to my gate, I open it wide. I step back and let them in. Because doors can be closed, doors can be opened, and the choice, always, belongs to the living.